Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel if you've been here before. If you have not, welcome to the channel. Alright, so today I'm going to get into the video by doing a pattern review of this Vogue 1486 pattern. It is a pattern designed by Nicola Fignetti, and it's a pretty neat pattern. So I am going to be doing a review of the top, which is view A. I have not made the skirt yet, but I do have plans to make it. This pattern was gifted to me by Crystal. She goes by Crystal Sews and Stuff. If you are not familiar with Crystal, please head over to her channel. She's a pretty cool girl, and I will drop her link in the description box below. All right, so let's get into the pattern review. So this particular pattern here, top A, is a pattern that is supposed to be a crop top back zippered pattern with a little dolman type sleeve. So this pattern, it ranges in two different sizes. So the first is A5, and it ranges from 6 to 14. And then, of course, like most commercial patterns, you can get the next size up, and those range from 14 to 22. Now, for this envelope here that I was gifted, the 6 to 14 range, the bust measurements for this range, starting with the size 6, is about a finished measurement of 33 inches. And for a 14, the finished measurements is about 38.5 inches. And that is listed on the tissue paper. However, the waist measurements are not listed on the tissue paper. And I am suspecting that that is not on the tissue paper. Those measurements are not on the tissue paper because it's a crop top. So, but I did lengthen my top, and so I'll give you a guesstimation of the waist size of my top, just in case you're interested in that. But as I said before, I did lengthen my top, so you'll have to take that into consideration, as well as a lot of the modifications that I've done. So with this particular pattern, I did 4 different versions of it. 2 were intended to be mock-ups. One of them, actually, I ended up liking it so much that it is my wearable mock-up right now. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you all the modifications and things that I've done, and hopefully you will like what I've done with this garment. So for the top of this pattern here, I chose a size 14, which is the 38.5 inches for the bust. For this particular project, I did not have to do any kind of alterations or anything to the bust, mainly because for the first 3 projects, I was working with some kind of knit or some kind of fabric that had slight stretch to it. So the very first piece that I chose to work with is it's similar to a scuba or a really light ponte knit. And when I say light ponte knit, I don't mean in weight, but I mean in like stretch. So it didn't have like a ton of stretch, but it also was not, very firm, if that makes any sense. So I chose that particular fabric to work with because I knew I wanted to make this top out of a scuba knit. Now, the pattern actually calls for silky type fabrics, satin, santung, those types of fabrics. But I wanted to make something out of a scuba knit. So I knew that I had my work cut out for me, and I knew I was going to be modifying this so that I can actually wear it with or use the pattern for scuba type knits or fabrics with some slight knit to them. And that's part of the reason why I chose a size 14. So if you have been following me for some time, you know the size 38.5 inches, that is my actual bust measurements. And I normally need about 1.5 to 2 inches for ease. So I'm usually choosing somewhere around a 39.5 or 40, sometimes even a 40.5, depending on the type of pattern I'm using and the type of fabric I'm using. So I knew that I wanted to use a scuba knit. And so instead of choosing a measurement that was 40 inches or whatever, I decided to go ahead and go with the 38.5 because that gave me the negative ease I needed for the scuba knit. So that's what I did, and that measurement is just perfect for the project that I was working with. And so that's one of the changes I made. And it's not really a change to the pattern, but it's just me. I was going into the project being mindful of the size that I would need and what I needed to do to make this work for scuba knit. So that's one of the things that I did. So the second is when I modified the pattern, I wanted to include into that modification a front zipper instead of a back zipper. And I knew that that would cause some potential problems because the front was not designed for a front zipper, whereas the back was. And so I had to, inspect the pattern and make sure that I can actually pull this off. First of all, I wanted to make sure that I could actually put the back on fold, and I was looking for any type of curves, or, sometimes the back have curves in the center of the back for shaping, or sometimes they'll have a dart or something like that in the back for shaping. And so since this pattern doesn't have any darts, I didn't have to worry about that. And the center back line is actually really straight, and I did not have to make any alterations to that center back at all. It actually went on fold without any issues. And so I went ahead and I tested that, and I put that on the fold of the fabric, and it worked perfectly. So instead of using that seam allowance here, because we have a zipper here, and so you have 5/8 of an inch seam allowance for both sides to be able to put the zipper in. So instead of taking that 5/8 of an inch out, I left the 5/8 of an inch in the back of the garment, and I substituted it for the front of the garment. So I did not have to add any extra allowance in the front of the garment for the seam allowance. I just used what was intended for the back for the front. And with that said, I took my front piece and I put the front piece on the grain of the fabric, and I cut it out twice. So I tested it on a black scuba knit fabric, and I'm going to show you that fabric here in a moment to this garment. So this is the first mock-up, as I stated before, and this is a scuba knit. So as you can see here, the front of the garment has a separating zipper. So if I do like that, and I have the zipper come all the way down, you'll see that this garment actually separates. So I did a poll question on Instagram, and I asked the question whether or not this should be an invisible zipper or a separating zipper. And most people actually agreed with myself that this would look more flattering as an invisible zipper. So I nixed this whole separating zipper idea, which I still think is really cool, but I think with the right type of fabric. I think with this scuba knit, it just doesn't look as appealing as I thought it would. So anyway, I nixed this idea and I used a invisible zipper instead. Now let me tell you about the modifications that I've made to have the zipper in the front of the garment instead of the back of the garment, because as you all have seen, the zipper is supposed to be placed at the back of the garment. So basically all that I did was I had to check to make sure that the back of the garment could actually be placed on fold, because you know, sometimes when you have a garment that has like darts in the back or a curved center back, or you know, any of those types of things, they are intended to be cut out twice and not be cut on fold. And I wanted to make sure that the center back was straight enough that I could actually put it on fold. And if it was not, then I would have to redraft that center back line. So that's where I started. And turns out that the center back, even though it was intended to be cut out twice and have a zipper back there, it still had a very straight line. And so I didn't have to do any modifications to the center back to place it on fold. So that was all great. I lengthened this about 1.5 inches below the waist because I didn't want to change the waist line at all. It actually was sitting right at my waist. The waistline was actually sitting right at my waist, but I wanted to lengthen the bottom portion of the garment because I didn't want it to be too cropped. And so I actually lengthened it about 1.5 inches below the waistline to give me some length down here. And that worked out perfectly for me. And again, remember, all these changes and everything that I am doing at the current is based on what I needed for a scuba knit fabric. So not for a sang tongue or silky fabric or stable non-stretch woven fabrics. So this, the modifications that I am making are based on what I wanted to make from my scuba knit. So, and with that said, for the facing pieces, I did the exact same thing that I did for the front and the back, which is I cut the back facing on fold and I cut the front facing out twice. And that ended up being really great. It worked really well. And instead of, so for the facing piece here, because this has like a slight curve going down in this area here, the facing piece is somewhat like that as well. And so I just flipped it on the inside and stitched it to the zipper. So, and that was really simple, very easy. For the side of the garment here, if you can see, the top of the sleeve is really long and it actually drapes over the shoulder and down to about the middle of the bicep. But underneath, as you can see, you have no sleeve or nothing at all. So this was a little bit tight in this area for me. It was a little bit too high and too tight. So I had to lower that about 1/2 inch. And after I did that, that was really great. But I had to modify the facing pieces because I lowered that underarm area there. So let me show you my very first garment that I made after making all these modifications and after doing this first mock-up. Again, the very first garment that I made was the black and pink floral fabric, or black and pink floral top that I used with the Minerva Craft fabric. And it turned out really lovely with one exception. I tried to add a band to the bottom of the garment because I thought that it was too short still. And so I tried to add a band to the bottom of the garment, and I soon learned that I did not like the band at all. So I ended up taking that off. I seam ripped that all off, and just for my hem, I flipped the bottom of the shirt inward by 5/8 inch, and I just zigzag stitched that in place. So let me show you my second mock-up that was intended for my last garment. Okay, so here is the second mock-up. So this is the second mock-up, but it is the first mock-up for my last garment. So let me explain what that means. So with the black mock-up, that particular mock-up served as a test for the black floral print, that fabric that I was gifted by Minerva Craft. This mock-up served as a mock-up for the black and white fabric that I was gifted from Minerva Craft 3 weeks later. So there are 4 different garments here, 2 Minerva makes, and the mock-ups were served as a test for my Minerva makes, if that makes any sense at all. All right, so this particular mock-up, this blue and peach and red whimsical fabric, it has a just a slight stretch in it across the fabric, the cross grain of the fabric. I would say about 5% stretch. It is a silky chiffon fabric from Joann Fabrics, and like I said, it has just a tiny bit of stretch in it, and so it's not at all like the scuba knit. And I knew that going into the project, and I knew, okay, I might need to do some modifications, because the 100% polyester fabric, the black and white floral fabric from Minerva Craft, it does not have any stretch at all. And this was the only fabric that I had in my stash at the time that was relatively close to it, that was silky, and that was, you know, a polyester, but it has a little bit of stretch. And so I went into the project thinking, okay, I need to keep this in mind. Because it has less stretch than the scuba knit, I was concerned that I would have to do some adjustments to the bust area. I did not have to do any adjustments to the bust area. However, on all projects, I did have to move the dart up about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, because it was quite low. So I had to move that dart up. But other than that, I didn't have to do any other adjustments with the bust area, which was really great. However, with this particular fabric, because it's a silky fabric, and you know, with scuba knits, they tend to cling to the body. Well, this particular fabric was so loose that I had to come in about a 1/2 inch on all sides. So about 1 inch on each side, basically. And that's basically what I had to do for this upper bust area, and about 1 inch above the waist. So I had to come in a little bit because it was very drapey, and I didn't like that look. And again, it's mostly because the actual pattern was intended to be a boxy pattern, and I was taking this boxy pattern and making it more of a form-fitting type pattern. And so that's one of the reasons why I had to do those adjustments, because of the type of fabric that I was using for it, which I didn't really mind. The only other adjustment that I did with this particular mock-up that I didn't do with the other is, instead of using the facings on the inside, I used bias binding. My bias binding isn't pretty or anything like that, because this was intended to be a mock-up, and I wasn't really concerned about but that's basically what I did. And with all that said, let me show you my final version and tell you my final modifications and my thoughts. Oh, but before I do that, I wanted to show you the placement of the zipper for this one. So remember, with the scuba knit, I told you that the zipper came all the way down about 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches above the hem. The zipper on this one stopped about 2 inches or inch or so below the breast area. And I found that I didn't really like that, because getting in and out of the garment, that still wasn't enough room to get in and out of the garment. And so for the last make, I stopped the zipper about here. And I'm thinking about going back and doing that for this one as well, so that I can get in and out of the garment more easily. So with that said, let's see the last garment that I made with this pattern. Okay, so here she is. This is the last top that I've made with the V1486, and probably my favorite. And I didn't do that many modifications at this point. I was concerned that I would not fit the top across the breast, and that I would actually need more room for ease, and that I would need to do a bust adjustment, but I did not need to. So it was risky behavior going into this project without knowing that beforehand, because the previous garment did have 5% stretch in the fabric. However, it worked out like a dream. So as you can see here, I have bias binding on the edge of the sleeves, but I did, instead of flipping it on the inside, I used the bias binding for the outside as a small little detail. The bottom of the garment was turned inward, and it was just stitched down like that. So I just didn't do anything fancy with the hem of the garment. Hold on, I don't think you can see that, but yeah, I just turned it inward and stitched it down. The zipper actually comes down a little bit more because I wanted to make sure that I could get in and out of the garment. Oh, I don't think I've shown you the back of any of these projects. So that's the back of the garment. As you can see, there's no zipper back there. And I think it looks pretty amazing, even without the zipper. I only made 3 major changes to this garment, which are lengthening the garment, because I didn't really like the crop top, adding a zipper to the front of the garment instead of the back, and moving the dart to position it about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch higher. So those are really the only big changes that I've made to the garment. I did have to lower that sleeve the armhole area to give myself some more movement, but that's a pretty standard adjustment that I have to make with most of these garments. And oh, lastly, again, I instead of having it as a boxy top, I brought the silhouette in just a little bit. So overall, I really like it. So to be honest with you, even though I titled this video pattern review, it's more of my experience with changing this pattern over. I do hope to make a version of this top straight out of the envelope, or as straight out of the envelope as I can get, so that way I can actually give you a review of the actual top itself without all the modifications. But I really like the adjustments that I've made. I hope that you like it too. I'll make sure that I put more pictures at the end of the video so you can see the collection of different photos I have of the different versions of this top. If you have any questions about what I've done to this pattern, my experience with the pattern, any questions at all, you can leave them in the comment section below. With that said, I do want to say a few more things about this pattern. I really think that this is an intermediate pattern. I think an intermediate sewist would have fun with this pattern. Even though I didn't sew this pattern straight out of the envelope initially, my very first mock-up was kind of close to it, and I really like this pattern. I do want to make a version where the zipper is in the back, and then I can give you my report on that as well. All in all, I like the style of it, the fit of it, the comfortability of it. And I think I would get a lot of wear out of these projects. So I would definitely say go for it. with the zipper in the back or not, I think it's still a lovely garment. It's pretty simple to make. And yeah, so anyway, that is my review of this pattern. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, please leave them with me in the comment section below this video. And until next time, my friends, stay creative.